Now it's time for Eric G's Pro Tips.
All right, guys, today I'm going to talk about the basics of a French drain system. Now, a French drain system is an excellent way to control excess groundwater in your basement or out in your yard and get it to a drier spot. So let's talk about how this works. First of all, what you have is maybe you've got a wet yard that's always marshy year-round. What you can do is dig a trench around the perimeter and maybe across it. And then what we do is we install in a perforated pipe that will either drain downhill and away or into a sump pump system so that can be moved away from the house and it'll dry that land out. So here's how it works. There's two different types of pipe. This is 3-inch. They also make it in a bigger 4-inch. First off, we have the solid pipe right here. This solid pipe is great for moving water, but it will do nothing in collecting it. So with the perforated pipe, it will actually soak into that. This is what you use to move it away. Now the perforated pipe has little holes that are cut into this all the way around it, and it's meant to collect the groundwater. The problem is you don't want to run this all the way down with this because then it's just going to keep either dropping it or collecting it, and this is susceptible to roots and dirt and everything else coming into it. So the first thing we're going to do right here is I'm going to dig a trench in this, and I'll show you how we'll install this in the ground so you could do it at your house. All right. So you want to get this pretty deep because the deeper it is, the more of a trench we have to collect water. So if you have a backyard that's just always muddy, getting this cleared out and collecting that groundwater is key. Sometimes for a big project, running a trencher or something like that can make this so much easier, but you're gonna need to get something about 8 or 10 inches wide so you can make sure this drains correctly. All right, so we're gonna wanna take our perforated pipe with the holes in it, and I like these drain sleeves like this. We're gonna actually pull this over the top of this to keep that silt from getting in here, because if we let that dirt, silt, sand come in, it's just gonna plug it up and it's not gonna work. So this is an inexpensive way to go. And all we're gonna do is put this right over the top like a sock. This will save you a ton of headaches later. And it's not too expensive. It's a pretty cost-effective way to go. All right, so once we get this taken care of, I'm gonna go ahead and set this in the ground. Now, it's depending on what you wanna do right here with this. If I'm trying to control groundwater, I'm gonna put a little bit of gravel down in first, because I'm gonna put gravel all the way up to the surface to try to get as much water into that hole as possible. So what you can do is literally just set this down in the hole. On that end, I'd have a cap or something like that, or it'd be continuing on to the rest of the run. Now this is where you have that decision. If you're trying to control groundwater coming down, let's say it's coming off the hill from your neighbor's house, I'm gonna put gravel all the way up. With this sock, technically I could actually bury this over the top of it. That's what the directions say, or you could put some gravel in there as well. So the next thing we're gonna do, just gonna fill this back in. All right, now this is gonna be gravity fed, so your lowest point, or wherever you're gonna put that sump pump, is gonna be the end of the run, and that has to be the lowest point in the yard that you're trying to drain. Now, one of my favorite little tools is this pop-up emitter right here, because if you wanna put the water in that area, maybe to, well, move it along down into the street or something like that, this will just snap on, and what happens is when the water pressure gets behind this piece here just pops up and lets the water come out. And then what's nice about it is when the water pressure is gone, it drops back down again, and it just looks like a nice little green thing in the middle of your yard. So this can be really nice when there's no power and you don't have to maintain it. All you have to do is let it do its thing. No sump pump needed, which means no electrical. No matter how you do this type of project, it takes a lot of planning, and you need to know the elevations of the whole thing, because you want the water to run smoothly from the high part to the low part, which could mean a sump pump. I hope that answers your questions about French drain systems. This could be really great for controlling water anywhere around your home. All right, guys, today I'm gonna give you my secrets for refinishing hardwood floors. Now, this is a significant project. This can take 3 or 4 days to get through for just a single level house. First thing I'm gonna do is try to identify what kind of floors you have, because that makes a difference whether you can refinish them or not. This right here is a gymnasium floor, so it's got a lot of finish on top of it, but it still is a solid hardwood floor, which is important because that gives us room to sand. If you have some of the click together or otherwise pre-finished hardwood floors, those are not great for that for a couple reasons. One, The whole thickness of hardwood on the top is maybe only as thick as your thumbnail, so it doesn't give you much room to sand. And then the aluminum oxide finish on top is pretty toxic, so it doesn't give you much room to work with. So you want to be working with a solid hardwood floor. Now this right here is maple, which means you really can't stain it very well. Oak is a much better floor for staining. So the first thing we're going to do is take this finish off, and this is kind of a significant part of this. This has got a lot of finish on it, being a gym floor. So what we're going to do is talk about, well, this grit on the sandpaper first. This is one of the most important things, because what happens is if I come in here with 120 grit, this is going to gum the finish up, and all of a sudden our sandpaper will get all gummed up and we'll be throwing it away. So the secret here is when you're gumming up the sandpaper to keep going down in grit, down to maybe a 32 or a 40, and we're going to take all of that off. If it keeps gumming up, then you have to go to an even coarser grit, and it gets a little scary, but that's what you have to do to take the finish off. So first up, let's do some sanding. For a big project like your home, you're going to be renting one of the big drum sanders, and it's some of the big equipment that you get from your home improvement retail store. But for this, we'll be using the belt sander. All right, now that we're down to 80 grit here, we're going to start sanding with this. But one secret to this is if you stop in one spot trying to get out a dent or a scratch, you're going to see it later on. So work the whole big area so that way you get that down evenly. Otherwise, you're going to see a divot in that finish. All right, now's the time you really want to run your hands across it and see where you can feel it, because if you can feel it, you'll see it in the finished product. And now that we're down to 80 grit, this is the time that I go back and start to fill. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill the entire floor area here. So if you're doing the entire house, I want you to get the floor sanded, edged, everything around it. Then you fill the cracks and divots. That way you'll never see it later. All right guys, there's a couple theories here you can do. One, you can mix up your own with yellow glue and then the wood that you're sanding with and get all that dust and use it that way. Or you can get it from your hardwood supply store and fill it that way. So what we're gonna do is just gonna do a nice skim coat over everything right here. And that way you can fill it all. And I like to trowel this over the entire floor. And it'll just fill in all the cracks, crevices. And then once it's dry, it dries really quick, we'll have it all filled in. All right guys, now you need to pay attention to what your finish manufacturer recommends. For mine, we're gonna go 120 grit next and get this sanded down. Always follow the instructions on the finisher you're gonna use, because they could give you a different grit every single time. All right, at this point of the game, I like to get away from sanding with the grain with one of our drum or belt sanders like this and go to something rotary. That way we can really start to polish this out. So my next step here is to step up to 180 grit so we can really start to get a polish on this wood right before we put the color coat on. Let's do this. All right, as you can see, we're starting to really get the polish on here. It's starting to look like fresh wood again, which is what we're looking for. And if you notice, this maple is really white compared to the yellow of the finish. And some of that has to do with aging with sunlight, and some of it has to do with the finish you're putting on top of it. If you were to put an oil-based finish on this, it's really gonna bring the yellow or that gold amber out of it. Or if you do a water-based, it's gonna do a better job of keeping this a white hardwood. Now, maple is notoriously hard to stain. If I was to come in here and hit this with a medium stain, it's gonna look blotchy and horrible. So you kind of have to embrace the wood you've got. So for this, I recommend maybe doing something very light to even it out, or just let it be natural and start with your finish coats. Now, after you've got everything sanded and you've got all the dust cleaned up, everything out of it, next you're gonna hit it with a sealer coat, let that dry, scuff sand that, put on your 2 coats of finish. Now, it depends on what finish you're using, always follow those directions. Those are my tips to a beautiful hardwood floor. But just remember, this is about a week-long project and materials could cost you a couple $1,000 bucks.